The WTA is being criticized. Furthermore, this time, it goes beyond rankings and awards. Funds. Eala Alex, one of the athlete's emerging stars, they've done something that nobody has saw coming. They are being sued by her. A match that ought to have honored her skill became a nightmare that uncovered the negative aspects of professional tennis. What transpired in that courtroom was more than just contentious. That was Eala's legal team claims that nothing short of stealing. Now, the whole as one player the tennis world is observing refuses to remain quiet. Here's an account of the spiral of a single match into the largest controversy in women's tennis has not been seen in years. Eala Alex's name had been murmured for a long time in tennis circles. She was unknown to the majority of her supporters. Birth she carried in the Philippines weight of a whole country's tennis. She was carrying dreams. When she has already won a U.S. Open at the age of 17. Juvenile title, turning into the first Filipinos will do this. It wasn't only a triumph, it was a declaration. The Southeast Asia observed. The Filipino nation exploded with joy, and Alex, she was only just beginning. The changeover from youth to professional tennis, the circuit is cruel. Positive professions have given way under that strain. What there is more competition and higher stakes. Greater, and the error margin nearly not at all. Eala, however, wasn't terrified. She battled her way through the competitors, persevering, overcoming injuries, qualifying, and moving up the rankings gradually. Each win felt merited. Each setback taught her something. She was in early 2025, knocking on the top 50's door, and Tennis Insiders anticipated a year of breakthrough. Next came the WTA 250 Luxembourg Open tournament that ought to have been a first step. Eala was pitted against a superior-ranked opponent, but she had faith in herself. Her crew had faith. Filipino people admirers who had come to see her play were assured. This was intended to be her opportunity to demonstrate that she'd been a member of the elite, an opportunity to show the world that she's a successful junior. Wasn't a coincidence. She stepped upon that court, her eyes blazing, and the kind severe famine that only results from years of a sacrifice. She served sharply at first. She used exact ground strokes. She had playing the best tennis she's ever had. Also for a while, it appeared to be going precisely as intended. But in the workplace, nothing is ever certain in tennis. Also what transpired next would be different. All things. In addition to Alex Eala, for the whole sport. Because occasionally the greatest conflicts are not fought with a racket. They are occasionally fought in courts. And this one was going to start. What could possibly go wrong in a one game that a lawsuit results from? Stay with me because of what will happen next. Will surprise you. The initial set was electric. Eala was having fun with strength and accuracy. She moved her opponent like a chess master around the court. She was 6 feet 4 inches and the audience was buzzing. Filipino flags fluttered in the stands. Social media was already dazzling with highlights. This was everyone had been waiting for Alex Eala to observe. However, the second set is where things began to go apart. It started quietly. A phone call that appeared dubious. Eala's bullet struck the at least it seemed to be baseline. It was called out by the line judge. Eala looked at the clay mark, her brow wrinkled, but she remained silent. Not quite yet. She would put that off till it truly mattered. Then it occurred once again. And once more. Near misses that might have in any case. Everything appeared to go one way. Direction in opposition to her. In the fifth match in the second set, Eala struck what appeared to like the ultimate victor. The audience gasped. It was in. It must have been in. However, the call was made. Eala halted mid-celebration. Her expression was a blend of incredulity and annoyance. She went up to the umpire and gestured to the mark. Her tone was forceful but calm. The ball was present. The mark is visible. The referee hardly looked down at it. The call is still in effect. Eala posed a challenge. The playback in slow motion demonstrated what all of the stadiums know previously. The ball had made contact with the line. It was enjoyable. The phone call was overruled, but the harm had already been done. There was a break in rhythm. Her attention was broken. And the pattern went on. In the middle of the second set, It seemed as though Eala was up against more than simply her rival. Every crucial decision went the opposite direction. An important ace that ought to have pointed out a breakpoint for her. Despite the fact that replays later revealed the line was clipped. A let that wasn't called on a serve that was obviously touched the internet. The pundits were beginning to observe. The spectators were beginning to whisper. Additionally, Eala was beginning to unravel. In the second set, she lost 36. However, the pain wasn't caused by the loss. It was the way it took place. When the third set started, the tension was oppressive. Eala attempted to refocus, made an effort to ignore the noise, however, she was shaken. Her adversary, recognizing the change in momentum, performed aggressively, taking advantage of each Eala's armor broke. The last straw arrived in the third set at 45. Compliment point. When Eala served, her opponent gave it back for a long time. Obviously lengthy. Eala lifted her arms in celebration, attempting to force a deuce, but the judge called it in. Eala froze. The ball had fell at least 3 inches past the baseline. The audience exploded, not in joy, but with fury. Eala approached the net with beseeching eyes. With the referee. You must verify that. Please. The umpire declined. Not a Hawkeye review, simply a frigid glance, no second glance last choice. It's match time. Eala got up. For what seemed like an eternity, gazing at the spot on the floor where demonstrated what everyone was previously aware of. Next, she went to her bench, turned, and silently, she packed her luggage. However, within, there was a broken item. Furthermore, it wasn't only her soul. The match was lost by her. However, is it truly a loss, or is it worse? The response would take the shape of a legal paper that caused a stir via tennis. Alex Eala didn't cry during the press conference after the game. She didn't shout or accuse anyone. She seated with a microphone in front of them at that table. Of her, and spoke with a subdued passion. That was in some way stronger than any outburst might have been. I came here in order to compete. I came to play fairly. Tennis. What took place today wasn't equitable. I'm not mentioning my rival. Did anything incorrectly. She engaged in her game, however. I've never encountered anything similar, and I don't believe I ought to. What she said were cautious and measured, yet the feeling there was no denying what was behind them. When questioned directly if she felt taken advantage of, she hesitated, then made a statement that would reverberate around the world of tennis. I think each and every the player is entitled to their effort. Esteemed. Mine wasn't today. Inside the video became viral in a matter of hours. Snippets of the dubious calls were disclosed. Millions of times. Tennis commentators broke dissecting each contested point frame by frame. Players from the past offered their opinions. Martina Navratilova posted on Twitter. I have previously witnessed poor officiating, but this was different. Players are entitled to better. Billie Jean King demanded reforms that happen right away. The hashtag #Justice for Eala was popular worldwide. However, the response wasn't unanimous. A few defended the authorities, claiming that errors occur, and Eala had to acknowledge the loss with dignity. Others made the observation that she had the chance to question and had not always made strategic use of them. The tennis community was divided, and there was intense debate on all platforms. Fans from the Philippines were very outspoken. One of their own had witnessed what they perceived it as obvious abuse on a worldwide platform. Videos of protests, requests, including boycotts, for the social media was overrun by WTA. The strain was growing, not only on the officials who had worked that game, but on the complete women's tennis governing body. Additionally, just when it appeared that the dispute may disappear into the sports drama in the background, an announcement was made by Eala's unlawful team. That made everyone halt dead in their tracks. She wasn't suing the WTA out of emotion. Discomfort, not for slander, but for what her attorneys detailed in the document as deliberate carelessness that led to the stealing of a chance to compete and monetary losses. The phrase they employed in the lawsuit would make headlines. 4 weeks, that dominated tennis news. Theft of matches. A case brought against the WTA. Not many players would dare. However, Alex Eala wasn't the majority of players. Additionally, What the crew discovered was much more unsettling. More than anyone anticipated. The legal action was filed in a global sports court, and when the information was made public, the tennis community as a whole gasped. This wasn't just a grievance about poor officiating. Eala's legal group had constructed a casing with great care, terrible and well-planned. The central this was the argument. The WTA had not succeeded in its obligation to provide equitable competition by using suitable officiating technology as well as instruction. The complaint highlighted that Hawkeye technology was available and utilized in important competitions, although the WTA-sanctioned Luxembourg Open had decided not to apply it to everyone. Courts. Eala's game had taken place on an external court devoid of technology despite her increasing status and the match's importance to her career trajectory. However, it was more than that. The Eala's team provided proof that the chair she was given line judges and an umpire. Match possessed a history of contentious calls in the past competitions. Internal emails were acquired. Through judicial discovery demonstrated that the WTA had complained about this, formerly serving as an officiating crew. However, they were still tasked with high-stakes work matches. According to the lawsuit, this pattern of carelessness had directly cost the game, which ultimately cost her ranking points, winnings, and future seeding arrangements. The monetary damages were measured. The instant prize money disparity, the anticipated revenue from competitions she would have eligible for a higher rating, and the chances for sponsorship that had collapsed upon the loss of damage her speed. However, the most explosive was the part of the case that thorough correspondence between WTA and tournament organizers. Text messages indicated that there had been pressure to continue using outside courts for matches swiftly, possibly having an impact to avoid a protracted review, officials' procedures that might slow down the timetable. According to one statement, "We need these bouts were completed by 6. Keep things moving." Eala's principal lawyer announced a quote that appeared in each significant sports journal. "This isn't regarding a single poor call. This relates to a systemic inability to safeguard athletes. When a company sets priorities logistics rather than equity, when they intentionally designate officials with troublesome pasts, when they reject participants' access to technology that might make sure justice is served, that is no coincidence. That is a decision. And Alex Eala is speaking up to declare that the decision is not acceptable. The phrase, match theft, was deliberate. It was thought-provoking. It was intended to rephrase the discussion from regrettable officiating error to institutional failure with quantifiable damage. And it was successful. All of a sudden, this wasn't limited to a single player's grievance. The question was whether the WTA was making sufficient efforts to safeguard the sport's integrity. The legal action requested monetary recompense, but more significantly, it called for reform. Hawkeye is required for every WTA event. Courts, more stringent control of officiating, transparent procedures for managing complaints, a thorough revision of how technology and human discernment intersected in the world of professional tennis. Alex in a conflict, Eala had fired the opening shot. That would change tennis for women. Would the WTA retaliate? Would they fold instead? The WTA had an option. Acknowledge errors or defend a system that was obviously damaged. Their reaction would decide not just the result of, in this instance, but the future of the entire athletics. The WTA's first reaction was just what you would anticipate from a big sports organization dealing with a public relationship nightmare. Being cautious, politically astute, and defensive. In part, their official statement said, "The WTA is dedicated to fair play and the greatest officiating standards. Although we understand each player's frustration after a challenging game, we uphold the honesty of our officials and our procedures. We'll examine Ms. Eala's assertions using the suitable legal avenues." Translation: "We don't acknowledge anything, and we'll battle this." However, fear was growing behind the scenes. There were calls from sponsors. Broadcast questions were being asked by partners. Other players were beginning to voice their concerns concerning their personal encounters with dubious officiating. The legal action had created a floodgate, and the WTA was having difficulty keep it in check. A few players openly backed Eala. Angeber posted on Twitter, "Every the player has experienced this annoyance. It's time for us to take action on it." Coco Golf uploaded a video talking about the significance of technology in removing human error. Bigula, Jessica told her personal tale of a meeting where bad decisions had altered the result, If we have the technology to fix, why don't we make use of this? Everywhere. However, some were more be careful. A few of elite players implied that Eala was exaggerating, that litigation wasn't the solution, and that participants had to acknowledge officiating is never going to be flawless. One previous champion, anonymously communicating with, according to a tennis journal, "We've all made poor decisions. You go on. This litigation creates a risky precedent." The argument was just as heated. Journalists commended Eala's bravery, presenting her as a whistleblower and revealing systemic issues. Others charged her with being a bitter loser who was unable to lose. Op-eds showed up, with titles such as, "Is tennis being saved by Alex Eala or demolishing it?" and "When does advocacy turn into entitlement?" The competition sponsor of the Luxembourg Open in a discreet manner separated themselves from the occasion, issuing a declaration stating that they encouraged fair competition and looked eager to collaborate with organizers to guarantee the greatest standards. Business jargon for, "We don't want to be connected to this debacle." In the meanwhile, the WTA engaged a well-known legal firm, renowned for standing up for sports groups in situations with significant stakes. They submitted a motion to reject, claiming that athletes waive the ability to file a lawsuit over officiating choices at the time of registration for competitions. The Eala's team retaliated that was not covered by the waiver institutional fraud and carelessness. The case was scheduled for a full hearing, and globally, tennis enthusiasts were enthralled to each update. Sports weren't the only thing involved. News these days. It was a cultural moment, a discussion about justice, power, and if athletes were entitled to demand more from the organizations that controlled their careers, and then came the leak. No one, but someone inside the WTA knows who, forwarded internal records to an investigative journalist covering sports. Records revealed that the WTA had carried out an internal review following a match and had really discovered that several officiating mistakes had happened. The review suggested punitive measures for the officials participated and recommended modifications to stop such events in the future. However, the WTA had never released the review to the public. When the news broke, they had buried it. The reaction was violent and swift. How could they protect their officials publicly while discreetly admitting had they erred? How could they battle Eala's lawsuit while perched on proof that backed up her assertions? Everyone was cornered by the WTA, eagerly awaiting their next move. The WTA was aware of everything along. At this point, the question wasn't whether justice was at issue, and Eala was correct. Would be served in reality. And what happened next would permanently alter tennis. Weeks following the release of the leaked documents public, the WTA published a fresh statement. This one wasn't like the others. Corporate speak, no digression, only a direct recognition. Following careful evaluation, we acknowledge that mistakes occurred made while presiding over Miss Eala's match. Additionally, we acknowledged that our in answer to her worries, inadequate. We're determined to better. They denied any legal responsibility. That would not be permitted by their attorneys, but they made broad announcements. From now on, all WTA competitions would be necessary to put Hawkeye or anything like into practice. Technology on each court used for games, not only the courts in the center. A new independent, the committee in charge of oversight, would be created with the participation of players, and they established a systematic procedure for players to complain about officiating in an open manner, inquiries and public responsibility. It wasn't all that the demand in Alex Eala's case was noteworthy, and more significantly, it was an admission made in public that there was a breach in the system. The lawsuit, the matter was resolved out of court. Although the terms were private, the sources near the negotiations indicated that Eala was compensated financially and, more significantly, an official apology. Issued a declaration stating, "This was It's never about me versus the WTA. This was to ensuring that no other participant must experience what I did. I am thankful that genuine change is taking place." However, this case has far-reaching effects beyond the WTA or even Alex Eala. It's initiated a discussion that is still taking place today. Should athletes possess legal action when institutional? How do setbacks impact their careers? How much? What authority should governing bodies have over the individuals whose work produces their income? Additionally, in a time where technology can get rid of human mistake, is there any justification for not using it? Other sports are observing. In other leagues, players are posing comparable queries. The Alex Eala case has developed into a point of reference for advocacy for athletes in all sports world. Regarding Eala, she has returned, playing tennis on the court that caused everyone to adore her initially. Her position has increased, her self-assurance has returned, and she has the knowledge with her that she fought for more than herself. She battled for each and every player following her. There are still some who criticize for the legal action. They advise her to have simply moved on and accepted the defeat. Continue. However, some regard her as a hero, someone who was prepared to put her at risk repute as well as her connections within the athletic ability to defend what was correct. The truth is most likely someplace betwixt. She isn't a bad guy and she is not a saint. She is merely a participant who, upon witnessing unfairness, and as a result, she transformed the game. The tale of Alex Eala's the WTA lawsuit is about more than poor decisions or controversy in the courtroom. It's about bravery. It concerns responsibility. And it has to do with the kind dramatic transformation that only occurs when someone is courageous enough to make the demand. The game of tennis is better as a result of her actions. The technology is superior. The oversight is improved. Players are now aware that they have a voice, and that voice is important. Are there additional disputes? Naturally. Will officiating ever be flawless? Most likely not. However, because to Alex Eala, the system is slightly more equitable. Moreover, that is worthwhile to fight for. If this narrative caused you to reflect, if it caused you to feel, don't keep anything to yourself. Click the subscribe button. Give a tell me what you think in a comment. Did she depart too, or was Eala right to sue? And let everyone see this video who enjoys justice, tennis, or simply like a good underdog tale. Due to this is what occurs when the player declines to back.